This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. On today's program, I welcome the CEO of the Zig Ziglar Corporation, Mr. Tom Ziglar. Tom has written a new book called 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times. That's our subject today. Let's welcome Tom Ziglar. Good to have you with us today, Tom.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I have such fond memories of I believe it was 2 different times I interviewed the great Zig Ziglar, your dad, and those are great memories for me. So just wanted to share that off the top.
Yeah, that's awesome. People ask all the time, what was it like growing up as Zig's son? And I said, well, as good as he was on stage, he was even better off stage. So it's a blessing for me.
I want to talk about him a little bit later in today's interview, but right now I want to talk about Tom Ziglar, you. I mentioned that you are the CEO of the Zig Ziglar Corporation. Tell us about your job there. What do you do there?
So at Zig Ziglar Corporation, we do several things. Here's our primary mission, and that is to encourage, equip, and support our speakers and coaches and trainers to go out and share the Ziglar philosophy and message. So we have several hundred coaches that we have certified and work with, and several hundred trainers and speakers that we do the same. And we really give them the materials, the support, what they need to go out and share a life-changing message. So that's what I do as the CEO. Personally, I love to write and speak and lead that fine group of coaches and speakers.
And you're talking about business coaches, correct?
Yes. We actually have both what the industry would call life coaches and leadership coaches. So a life coach is kind of a holistic approach around the wheel of life, which we do it a little bit different, mental, spiritual, physical, family, financial, personal, and career. So we don't leave out the spiritual. In fact, as we know, the challenges that people are really facing are found, the foundation of that challenge is in the spiritual side.
I love that Christ really is your base there at the Ziglar Corporation.
Yeah, if we come across as fairly intelligent, it's simply because most of our resource is God's Word.
Amen. Amen. You've got a good manual to refer to.
That's right.
Well, Ziglar specializes in helping businesses perform at a higher level, even during times of disruption, to borrow the title from your new book. And I don't know if anything has ever been more disruptive than COVID, other than maybe a world war. How did 2020 and 2021 affect your business model there at Ziglar?
So this is interesting. At the end of 2019, we had a bunch of people come to us and say, you should do a coaching certification online. We have people from all over the world who want to be certified, and it's difficult for them to travel. And so being the geniuses that we are, we said, yeah, we'll do that. And the first class at the end of 2019 sold out. And then we said, let's do that again. So we sold out the next class first part of January. And then they said, let's do that again. And COVID hit, and it was the only thing we could do. So we looked at it kind of as, God's nudges saying, you might want to consider this. And so 2020 and 2021 have both been very, very good growth years for us. And part of that is more people need truth and hope and encouragement now more than ever. They're actually seeking coaches now more than ever.
I can imagine.
And second, there are more people who have been, in a job or in a role who feel called or led to really make a difference in people's lives one-on-one, and they don't want to leave anything out. And so not only did the market get bigger for the customer, but the market got bigger for coaches who felt that calling. And so that's been really a blessing for us. So we've done really well. And then I had a book due with Thomas Nelson that I'd started working on at the end of 2019. And of course, that totally changed with the pandemic. And the book then became 18 months of research on how has business changed because of the pandemic and all of disruption and all the dominoes that fell. And that's really what the fruit is. The fruit is 10 leadership virtues for disruptive times. That's what came out of it. And that is really focused on coach leadership.
Well, as an interviewer, two things caught my eye very quickly. First of all, your last name. Anybody with the last name Ziglar will be a wonderful guest on the radio, you included. And the other is this book titled 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times. And I have a strong feeling that that is really resonating with business people out there. The book's been out, I don't know how long, but are you hearing feedback already?
Yeah, tons of feedback. And it's really hit the sweet spot. And then every day there's new research studies and articles and headlines that validate everything that's in the book. When the pandemic hit, everybody went home. I call it the certainty, the certainty of uncertainty and the reality of mortality. All of a sudden, collectively, everybody realized, hey, life is uncertain. And then we started losing people we love, friends and family who got sick, and jobs were changed, and some of them gone forever. And people said, you know what? They took a step back and they said, if I'm going to do something, I want it to count. I want it to be in alignment with my purpose, my why, and my calling. And as believers, that's very important. We want to make a difference where we go. And so remote work, hybrid work really took off, and standard of living actually went up because of that. In a lot of places, people's productivity increased. And so when the call came to come back to work, people said, I don't want to come back to work. I like working at home.
Yeah, I'm already working.
I'm working more than I ever have. Why are you going to add that commute back in?
I worked remotely yesterday, Tom, and I'm telling you, I get more done at home than I do in the office, hands down.
I know the whole idea of the reality that we can get up at 6:30 or 5 or whatever you get up and get our coffee and get a couple of hours in before the world starts. It just gives us a head start. And then I think one of the stats was something like 3 million women left the traditional workplace when they were sent home for COVID. And so many of them are saying, you know what, I'm not coming back. I've found a part-time job, or I've started my own job. I don't have the commute. And I get to take my kids to school. I get to plan a life. So many people with disabilities or, things that prevent them from having easy access to the workplace, they're thriving in this new environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I look at it is, if you make a fist and that fist represents your job, that's the way most people organized their life 2 years ago. And when all this uncertainty hit and they went home, they realized, hey, that's not the most important thing. And so now when you look at the fist, it represents your family, your faith, your physical health, your mental well-being. And then the job now revolves around that instead of everything revolving around your job. I think that's a good thing. Dad said back in the 1970s and 80s, he said, if standard of living is your goal, quality of life almost never goes up. But if quality of life is your goal, standard of living almost always goes up. And of course, we know biblically and spiritually that when we put God first and those things first, we prosper everywhere else. And so it's almost, to me, it's like a wake-up call of we've had our priorities out of line. And now you see this great friction going on between the autonomy that people want, the ability to put first things first, and corporations understanding that if people aren't doing well in their core life, their productivity goes down. And so I see a lot of real positive changes happening, because if my well-being, my mental health and well-being, my ability to be productive depends on, to a large degree, my spiritual condition, then that means that we've got to talk about faith again rather than ignoring it or holding against people when they talk about it.
Well, and I was also thinking how, as the culture changes, how people view work, you're helping business leaders march right along with that flow, because otherwise we're going to be left behind. Would you not agree?
100%. There is a kind of a mindset shift that has to happen in leadership. And I compare it the old style versus the new style. The old style of leadership, which we've known for a long time, isn't that effective. It's top down, command and control. Do it because I said so. Very, just authoritative. So the term I use is that's a T-Rex leader. They have sharp teeth and short arms, right? Mm-hmm. And you take that style and you have them lead over a camera on a Zoom call, and it turns people off. And we could all ask ourselves the question, do we like to be told what to do, or do we like to be asked what we think is the best way to do it? Well, it doesn't matter if you're 19 years old or 62. We all like to be asked. And so a coach leader approaches it from a very collaborative perspective, asking questions, trying to find out the personal motivations of each person on their team, and then co-creating a plan to develop that person so that that person can be a better person tomorrow than they are today. And they do that in a professional way on their job, whatever their job roles are. How do I help each team member develop into a more effective person on the job? And then that kind of goes back to my core mission statement, which is real simple. My personal mission is to create the atmosphere that allows you to become the person God created you to become. And so as a coach leader, that's what we're doing, is we're creating an atmosphere. And to me, atmosphere is different than environment. Atmosphere means it's spiritual, it's relational, it's trust, right? It's integrity, it's humility, it's respect, it's kindness. It's the virtues that we talk about in the book. When I create that kind of atmosphere, then that allows people to flourish. And so a coach leader, instead of being control-focused like a T-Rex leader is, a coach leader is accountability-focused. In other words, I help you develop as a coach leader a plan of action that will allow you to be successful in your job. And I ask you how you're going to do that. And then you create the plan. And then I simply say, is it okay if I hold you accountable to your plan? That transfers ownership to the team member. And that's where the power comes, is when people see that they have a future, that they buy into the vision and virtues of the company, and that they're growing every day.
I love it. I'm talking with Tom Ziglar. I'm David Warren, and we are discussing his new book, The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times Such as These. This book is available wherever books are sold, plus the audiobook is read by today's guest and is available on audible.com. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this thing that Tom just mentioned, coach leadership. Back after this. I'm David Warren, here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world. reading from the inside flap of Tom Ziglar's new book, The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times. It says, Coach leadership turns unwanted disruption into unprecedented development. You say, Tom, disruption is inevitable, but rather than being shocked by it, you can proactively prepare for it and lead your team effectively no matter what happens. The secret, according to you, is being a coach leader who, number one, embraces and thrives on disruption. Number two, recognizes the importance of bridging the gap between management and staff. And number three, who values growth as a team and as individuals. And I'd like to touch on these three different keys to coach leadership. The first one makes my teeth hurt as a leader, that I should embrace and thrive on disruption. I like it when it's peaceful, Tom. Why should I embrace disruption?
Oh, because disruption is going to come more intensely and more frequently as we go through time. It's here, and it's staying, and it's getting bigger. Early in my life in college, I played college golf, and I thought I was going to be a professional golfer. And one of my heroes was Tom Watson. And Tom Watson he won 8 majors. 5 of those majors were British Opens. And they asked him one time, how come you won so many British Opens? And he said, bad weather. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, well, when I'm playing good, and he was an elite golfer, he said, when I'm playing good, there's only maybe 20 people in the field of 140 who can compete with me. Mm-hmm. He said, but when the weather's bad, I only have to beat 4 or 5 of them because they give up. Mentally, they give up. And so as a coach leader, what we do is pray for rain. Because when the weather's bad and we embrace it with the right mindset, then our influence is amplified. And that goes down to this idea that we're not about a fixed mindset. We're not about, hey, we're going to do it the way we've always done it, and we're just going to keep tweaking that system. If that's who you are, then if you had a sit-down 5-star dining experience in New York City in March of 2020, you went out of business, right? Because you can't provide that anymore. Mm-hmm. But if you had a growth mindset and you suddenly realize that, you know what, nobody's delivering 5-star experiences, why don't we do that? Then you've solved a problem for your customer base. And that's really one of my favorite quotes is around that kind of concept. One of my good friends is Rabbi Daniel Lapin. And he says this, when you solve a problem, you're often rewarded with certificates of appreciation. We call that money. And the more problems you solve, the more certificates you get. And then the rabbi said this. He said, God is never happier with his children than when they're solving the problems of his other children.
That's great.
So as a coach leader, if we look at disruption or change as an opportunity to grow, and we see all of these problems amplified, and we get focused on solving those problems, the creator of the universe smiles at us. I was at a conference, and there was a speaker there, and he was an economist. He was also an expert on prophecy. And somebody asked him, what do you see? You know, are we in the end times? And he said, I don't know. But then he said this. He said, I do know this, that more people have come to Christ through the generations when the believer was side by side with the person suffering, rather than in a position of prosperity reaching down to help them up.
That's interesting.
And that really struck me. And I'm not saying we need to, go empty our bank accounts and suffer right next to people. But what I am saying is that when people are struggling and a coach leader comes in and says, hey, let's figure this out. It's our ability to learn. It's our ability to be creative. It's our ability to to collaborate, to go out and solve problems, and I've got you, and we'll figure it out. When that kind of mindset enters into a working relationship, it's a game changer, because now the people on your team, they see this stability in the midst of the storm, and they wonder, where does that hope come from? Where does that outlook come from? Because we've all been impacted, right? All of us have had some amount of suffering in this. And when we present that, and then it adds to the bottom line at the same time, that is a powerful combination for influence.
We talked a little earlier about how the old leadership system of leading from top down, because I said so, kind of the strong-armed boss, be it a man or a woman leading, that what's working with today's culture and is embraced by workers, happy workers, is a coach leader. And I'm sitting here thinking, you have to really, as a coach leader, work on your love walk, because you got to love people if it's going to work out well.
Absolutely. And when we talk about that, the book is really framed in 3 sections. The first section is what we call the mindset of a coach leader. And that's what we just talked about, the idea of I'm going to embrace disruption. The second section, which is the body, the main piece of the book, is the 10 virtues. People ask, or they say all the time, hey, you want to be a good leader? Just love your people. But nobody says how. Nobody reaches out and says, this is how you love your people. So when you walk out the 10 virtues, that is the how you need to lead. When we talk about kindness or respect, the book goes into details of how you can actually demonstrate those in the way you lead and treat and build relationships with your team. And by doing that, it gives you an amazing ability to help people see what's possible. As a coach leader, you need to create the vision, the future that your people see. But they're only going to trust that if the actions that you take and the way you build a relationship with them correspond to the vision you see implant in their mind of what could be. And so that's really what it's about. Now, the interesting thing is, for people who have read God's Word, if you go through the 10 virtues, they're right out of 1 Corinthians 13, which is the love chapter. And that, to me, is what it's all about, is walking out God's love. And we give ourselves credit sometimes where we'll tell people, hey, I love you. And that person is like, well, I can't really tell. And you're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, all I can observe is what you do.
Yeah. I'd like to list those 10 attributes, if I may.
Absolutely.
They're kindness, selflessness, respect, humility, self-control, positivity, looking for the best, being the light, never giving up, and standing firm. And to go back to your story with me, David Warren, saying to somebody over whom I'm a supervisor or a boss, or to use your better term, a coach leader, to say, I love you, well, what does that mean? Well, I had a perfect example the other day. One of my employees said a sarcastic remark to me, and I wanted to say a sarcastic comment back to the employee. But love in this case was self-control. And with me as a coach leader where I work, I'm held to a higher standard. Tom, talk.
You know, the first kind of sentence in self-control is stop digging the hole. You know, it's like a leader, and there's proverbs about it. Without self-control, it's like a city without walls. We suffer, and we destroy our own ability to lead. And when we look across the board, I'll just give you an example.
Okay.
And this is kind of headlines going on right now. So we hear about there's a big thing in the corporate world called DEI training, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then it can go down different paths. It can go into a very politically and motivated and a lot of times dividing type of philosophy. But it can also bring out some really good points. So I was talking to, I have a coach that I work with. Her name is Michelle Delgado. And we were talking about this. And she said, well, as a coach leader, how would you include somebody like me? And so I started thinking about it. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she is from Puerto Rico, and she grew up in the corporate world in the East Coast. And she's about my age, which is in the 50s. And she said, early in my career, I was, my personality, my culture, the environment is I would never ask for a shot at a project. I would never ask for a raise. I would never assert myself because it's just not the way it was. And she said, I had to learn that. And because it took me some time to learn that, I feel like my career advancement was delayed. It could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we show love in that respect? Well, this is what a coach leader does. You're onboarded, you're brand new in the business, and the coach leader sits down with somebody like Michelle and says, hey, why are you here? What's your goal? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What's your dream? What kind of career do you want to have? Would you like to make more money in the future? In other words, why not ask each person on our team what it is that they want out of the position they're in, and then help them craft a plan to get there? Because if somebody's coming from a background where they feel a little insecure for saying something, hey, I should have had that chance, or hey, what about me for a raise? What if we just meet it head on? Because look at the logic in this. Top performers want to work for an organization or business that has clearly defined vision and virtues that align with who they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's who they want, right? And they also want to be compensated based on their contribution. That's only fair. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. Everybody wants to be compensated based on their contribution.
Right.
So if I come to you and I say, hey, you know what? I want to pay you more money next year than this year. And in order to do that, we have to be more profitable because of your contribution. Does that sound fair? Well, a top performer is going to say, absolutely. How can I contribute more so that my compensation goes up? Mm-hmm. And then the coach leader says, let's figure it out. What do you need to develop in yourself, in your attitude, effort, and skill that will allow you to be more effective on the job so we can pay you more? And so walking out love isn't responding to when they have a question. I mean, that's good. But walking out love is going to them and asking the question before they bring it up.
Interesting.
Because then they know you care about them rather than yourself.
Because you thought of them before they thought of you.
Exactly.
Hey, before we take a break, I want to talk a little bit about your dad. And he really exemplified these 10 virtues that you list in the book. He was so Christ-like. And he passed about 10 years ago. Is that correct, Tom?
A little over. This is the 10th year, November of 2012.
Okay.
So
all right.
A little over 9, yeah.
Well, you tell a story in your book, 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times, about an example of selflessness, one of the virtues. And it's when you and your dad split a beef steak. Tell us that story if you would.
Yeah. Boy, Dad loved his steak. I mean, when I say steak and close my eyes, I can see Dad's grin as he would, take that first bite. And so we had a tradition in our house. And I was a young boy. I was probably in the 8 to 10 category, maybe 11. And the tradition is that whenever there was something left over and we all wanted it, one person would cut it and then the other person would choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Dad grilled some steaks, and it just so happened that he had two steaks that were, good sized and about the same size. So we each got one of those. And then there was a third steak that was a little bit smaller, and it was just sitting there on the table, and we were both looking at it. And Dad said, hey, do you want to split that steak? And I said, yeah. And he basically gave me the knife and said, cut it. Well, I was just coming of the age where I was starting to understand kind of the virtues and values that Dad lived by. And Dad was so fair and so loving and so selfless and so giving. And so instead of cutting the steak 50-50 and letting him pick, I cut it about 65-35, where there was obviously a bigger piece.
And you did that on purpose, right?
On purpose.
Okay.
Because I wanted to see what Dad would do more than I wanted 50% of the steak, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was like a little boy testing his dad. And so Dad looks at it, and I can see it. I can remember his eyes. He realizes that I've now put him in a dilemma. And he reached over and he grabbed the smaller piece. And I said, wait a second, Dad, I want you to have the big piece. And that is selflessness. And because he could have taken the bigger piece and said, look at that. But that to me is, as a coach leader, how do you split the steak? When people on your team do a fantastic job, how do you elevate them and recognize them and take the back seat?
Yeah.
Right. And people in the world, they don't get that, right? That's not the way they're taught. That's not the way, it's like everybody runs to get to the front of the line and they elbow each other out of the way. I have another metaphor, and you've probably heard it. It's the metaphor of the difference between heaven and hell. And imagine all of humanity's at the banquet table, and there's, everybody's got this huge feast in front of them, and you're there at the banquet table, and you look down and you can't wait to eat all your favorite foods right in front of you. But attached to your hands, you have a 3-foot-long knife and a 3-foot-long fork, and they're duct taped. You can't get them off. And so you cut the meal in front of you, but as you try to put the food into your mouth, you can't, because the fork is too long. It doesn't reach your mouth. And so the difference between heaven and hell is, in hell, everybody's trying to feed themselves. And in heaven, everybody's feeding the person across from them at the table. And to me, that's such a powerful vision of where we are today in the world, is as leaders, as coach leaders, when we're feeding the people at the table around us, the bounty is unbelievable. But when we're selfish and only focused on feeding ourselves, so much goes to waste, and we never really get satisfied.
The name of the book we're talking about today is The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times by today's very special guest, Tom Ziglar. And this book is available wherever books are sold, out on Thomas Nelson. Plus, the audiobook is available through the website audible.com, and it is read by Tom. And I listened to it and enjoyed his narration very much. I'm David Warren, and when we come back from this break, I will ask Tom about what he calls his most powerful habit. Back after this.
The Road Show is a listener favorite. which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup, and contact information and links to our Roadshow sponsors and its hosts. So join us for the Roadshow, whether on your radio or on your computer at oasisnetwork.org.
As we start this next segment with special guest Tom Ziglar, who is the author of the book, The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times, I want to read just a little bit from the book. Tom writes, "When disruption comes, the team immediately looks to the leader to see what the leader is going to do. Will the leader freeze up, act like everything is okay, or overreact? A coach leader should be prepared in advance and immediately begin to stand firm in the storm. Never giving up on the mission, the coach leader becomes the light that shines hope on the team. Love truly does endure all things, and love shows up in full force at the beginning of the storm and guides people all the way through the storm. When disruption comes, here is what you need to do now." And then Tom goes on to give excellent advice throughout the book. And one of the things that he shares is his most powerful habit. And I have something pretty similar, Tom. So we are kindred spirits. I get up early as well, but you have something called the never give up perfect start to your day. Tell us about it.
Yeah. And, this is something I've been practicing for a long time. And then it got refined when the pandemic started. I started talking to so many people, leaders, everyday folks, and they were losing sleep. They couldn't sleep at night. There was so much worry, so much anxiety, so many things going on that their whole life was being turned upside down. And so I started thinking, well, how do we, I have this saying, either the day happens to you or you happen to the day. So how do we start the day in a way that allows us to be as effective as possible? And so I came up with the never give up perfect start. And so what that really means is that, hey, we're in disruption. The trial has come, right? The test is on us. And we're feeling it personally. We're feeling for our team and for our family, for our community. And so that's what this is about. So if you're under pressure, if there's something big going on that you're trying to figure out, here is a great way to start. When you get up in the morning, and I recommend this is the first thing you do. And so if it takes some time, you might want to get up a little earlier in order to do this. But if you get this done, it changes the outcome of your day. For the first 5 minutes, you start with gratitude, prayer, and a time of reflection. Now, what we're trying to do is we got a lot of things going on, is we're trying to change the state of our mind. And so gratitude is one of the most powerful things that you can do. What are you grateful for? Write a list out of the things that you are grateful for. And then take that to prayer. Settle your mind. And then the next 10 minutes is, once the gratitude is going, we've got to put the right kind of input into our mind. So read or listen to something inspirational. This could be God's word. It could be a book or an audio program that lifts you up so that you're now thinking in a positive way. A devotional would be a fantastic thing to do, because what we need to do is, from the very start of the day, we need to get our mind thinking in the right direction. And I believe that our mental choices is the number one thing that we need to get a hold of. If we've got the mental going in the right direction, then that ability to choose correctly, because our mindset is right, influences everything else. Number 3, this only takes 2 minutes. Review your why. Why are you here? What's your purpose? What's your dream? Read it to yourself. Confirm it in your mind. And so we're trying to elevate. Okay. At this point, we're looking at what's the big picture? Why does it matter? Confirm that. And then the next 5 minutes is journal your thoughts and feelings around the challenge you're facing. Get clarity on it. Focus your mind again. So we've changed the state of our mind, right? So we got up with gratitude, then we put some positive things into us, we reconfirmed our why, and now we're journaling what we're feeling about it. We're getting real clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Once we write that challenge out in detail of what it is, then we got to answer these 5 questions. This takes about 10 minutes. What problem do you need to solve? Could be problems. What challenges do you face in solving those problems? What skills and knowledge do you need to solve those problems? Who can help you solve the problem? And what is the plan to solve the problem? Now, those are all really interesting questions from this perspective. You see, short-term confidence that usually ends up in a disaster is based on what I did yesterday. Hey, I won the game yesterday. I kicked the winning field goal. I closed the deal. Whatever that is. Well, the problem is you got to do that again every day. And when you get into a string of not closing the deal, your confidence goes down through the floor. However, long-term confidence is understanding as a coach leader. You don't have to have all the right answers. You just have to have the right questions. You've got to have the right people on your team. You got to know who to ask,
Mm-hmm.
because the way we handle disruption is through growth and learning and bringing in those more capable than ourselves to handle parts of that. And so the way you show confidence as a coach leader to your team isn't, hey, I've got all the answers. It's, hey, together we can find out the answers. And then number 6, this is the last part of the perfect start, is now that you've got those 5 questions clearly identified, you get to work on a plan. You spend about 45 minutes solving the problem with specific actions you can take that day. And so we move the anxiety and worry out of our mind onto a piece of paper.
Excellent.
That we can take action on. And we know that our confidence comes from who we know. And that could be a capital W on the who.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And our confidence comes from our ability to be creative and to learn and to grow. And who do we go for that? We go to solve the problems of God's children. And the people on our team, I believe, are gifts to us. There's a proverb that says, gosh, if only we were surrounded, before you go to war, seek the counsel of wise counselors. And I started thinking, maybe we're already surrounded by wise counselors, but we haven't built the relationship with them to where they offer up their counsel.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, earlier in today's program, you talked about quality of life equaling quality of work. And in the book, 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times, you say that perhaps the most important foundation to a coach leader's perseverance and never giving up is this concept, this quality of life equaling quality of work. How do you, as the CEO, the leader of the Zig Ziglar Corporation, ensure your employees' quality of life?
There's really just 2 things you've got to keep in mind here. The first one is that people who have problems at home, bring them to work. I mean, it's a fact.
Yes.
And the number one issue today in big business is health and well-being of team members. This is in HR departments all over the world. They know that if their people aren't doing well at home, then their performance on the job is suffering. And so the first thing is you got to understand that. And then the second is you got to follow that up with proactive questions. And that is, hey, how are you doing? How's this new work environment? We have a team member, Lori Majors. She was Dad's personal assistant for 35 years. This is her 45th year at the company.
That's great.
And it's amazing. But the reality is we're changing our office situation. We've been working at home more remotely. And that's the challenge for anybody. But if you have a 45-year track record of coming in every day at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting things done, talking to other people, and suddenly your whole work world changes, then we've got to be aware of that. We've got to, ask the question, how are you doing? What can I do? Can I get you a new computer for the home? Can we have more meetings in different ways? How do we go about doing this? And so the second piece, once you understand that quality of life is essential, then you got to ask the scary questions. Hey, how are you feeling? You sleeping okay? You getting your work done? And then everybody's different. So if you've got a 30-something on your team and they got young kids at home, how are they doing? What's school like? And you have to get an understanding of what it is that they're going through. The Great Resignation that's in all of the headlines, a big piece of that is burnout. Gallup says that if somebody doesn't have a good relationship with their manager, they will leave and work somewhere else for the same amount of money. But if they have a great relationship with their manager, with their leader, it takes at least a 20% raise to get them to leave. And so my question is,
interesting.
What kind of relationships do you have with your people? And do those relationships allow you the ability to find out what's going on in every area of their life? Because if they're going through physical struggle, relationship struggle, financial struggle, anxiety or worry, all of those things are going to impact their performance. And if they feel disconnected from you, they're going to think the solution is to find a job somewhere else. And what's going to happen? It's a lose-lose. Because if that's why they're leaving, they're probably going to go work for somewhere else that's like what they left. In other words, they're not going to find that connection.
Tom Ziglar is our wonderful guest on today's program. We're going to take one final break. When we come back, I want to mention the 10th leadership virtue before we say goodbye. But the book is called The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times by Tom Ziglar, available wherever books are sold. And the audiobook is available on the website audible.com and is read by Mr. Tom Ziglar. I'm David Warren. We're going to take a short break and be back for the wrap-up and talk about that 10th leadership virtue right after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. It has been such a joy to get to meet the son of someone whom I have respected and admired for so long, and now I pass that over to you, Tom Ziglar. I very much admire and respect you and know that you had some big shoes to fill there at the Zig Ziglar Corporation, and I think you're doing quite a fine job.
Thank you. I'm blessed.
Yes, you are. Okay, the 10th leadership virtue for disruptive times is standing firm. And you have a quote in the book that says, "Isn't it amazing that standing firm requires integrity and trust that is best created by being vulnerable and transparent?" Before we say goodbye, tell us how you exemplify this at the Ziglar Corporation, how you, as the leader, are vulnerable and transparent with your coworkers.
Yeah, vulnerability. There's been so many people who've written about it. Patrick Lencioni is one. That is probably the number one attribute of a successful team, meaning that the people on the team will raise their hand and say, I don't understand, or I messed up, or I made a mistake, or I need help. But they don't do it unless the leader is first vulnerable. So as a coach leader, the way you create this environment is by being transparent, admitting your mistakes. If you've taken the team in a wrong direction, come clean as fast as you can. If you don't know the answer, then let the team know, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need some help. So by you being vulnerable, it creates this atmosphere that allows people to be transparent and vulnerable as well. And so why is this essential? So this is the key point. This is a huge change in the way business is run. Since disruption, whether it's technological convergence or the next wave of COVID or international conflict or supply chain or the Great Resignation, it doesn't matter. Because it's happening in greater intensity and greater frequency, the more vulnerable we are, the faster we can solve the problems in front of us. What we don't want is for people to hide and not feel comfortable sharing that they don't know the answer, because that delays the solution. We need to get solution focused as fast as possible. Vulnerability increases the speed at which you can solve a problem.
That's great advice. Well, Tom, congratulations on the new book, The 10 Virtues for Disruptive Times by Tom Ziglar, CEO of the Zig Ziglar Corporation. Before we say goodbye, we've got a couple minutes left. Tell us what we'll find on the website, Ziglar.com, and Ziglar spelled Ziglar.com. What will we find?
Absolutely. So when you go there, you'll find some free gifts. We have a newsletter that you can subscribe to, and you get some free downloads. You'll actually get one of Dad's audio recordings. And then you'll find out about our programs where we equip coaches, speakers, and trainers to carry on, to make a difference. Of course, the 10 Leadership Virtues book is prominently displayed there. And if you need some hope and encouragement, you'll find that too. We've discovered that the world needs hope and encouragement now more than ever. So check it out. Get our newsletter. You should get the little book of big quotes, 100 of Dad's best quotes. So that's a great download that you get when you join us.
Hey, before we say goodbye, tell us what the quote is that your dad is so well known for. In fact, it's right there on your website.
Yeah, the Dad's quote is, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And ultimately, that's what a coach leader is all about, is the only way a coach leader is successful is if their people are successful. So how do you help your people become successful? And that's right out of Dad's quote.
Thank you, Tom, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
The book we've discussed, The 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times by Tom Ziglar, is available wherever books are sold, and the audiobook is read by Tom and available on the website audible.com. A big thanks again to Tom for joining us for the hour. I'm David Warren, and yes, it has been another great road show.
You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.